Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming today. This is to say talks about children's literature in the archive. So we've actually got quite a lot of literary connections in the county, and some of our best loved characters have their origins or inspiration in the county. I have to admit there are some slightly tenuous links in this just because there are. But so what we're going to look at today, this presentation will hopefully reveal some of these and the backstories, and it will focus on those intended for younger readers, although we will throw in a few that are considered older reading, especially some of the ones that were considered adults then but are now considered more for children. So, as they used to say in Jackanory, are you sitting comfortably? Good, and then we'll begin. First one we come to really is the Alice in Wonderland, the story of a girl who falls down the rabbit hole and finds herself in a strange magical world. Is thought to be based on Alice Liddell, a girl who often visited her grandparents who lived in Charlton Kings. Her grandfather was a chap called Dr. Henry Liddell. He was the Dean of Christ Church College in Oxford, and he was a close friend of Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, who was better known under his pen name of Lewis Carroll. Carroll was a maths teacher at Oxford, and one day in July 1862, he and his friend, the Reverend Robinson Duckworth, took Alice and her sisters, Lorena and Edith, on a boat trip along the Thames down from Folly Bridge in Oxford to Godstow. And you can still do this boat trip today. That's a fairly modern photo of looking down from the bridge itself. On the journey, Alice asked Lewis to tell them a story to keep them amused, and Carroll just simply invented a story about Alice and a white rabbit. Alice later asked him to write it down, and 3 years later he did, and it was published as Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. The Liddells lived in Hetton Lawn, Cudnall Street in Charlton Kings, and Carroll often visited them, quite a very frequent visitor, and took lots of photographs of the family and the children. Although it has to be emphasised, there was always a parent in attendance. There has been some recently talk about whether this was sort of more horrific purposes, but it wasn't. They were quite keen on this, and the parents were happy to let Lewis come and take photographs of the children. Many of the pictures were taken in Liddell's garden because it faced south and good for natural light. This is the photo of the house today I took last year. And we know there are several close links between Alice Liddell and Alice in Carroll's books. They're all found in the sequel to Alice in Wonderland, which is Alice Through the Looking Glass. The story was set on 4th of May, which is Alice Liddell's birthday. The fictional Alice is the same age as the real Alice. And the poem at the end of the Looking Glass, when read downward, actually spells out Alice's name. So you can see this. There are quite a lot of links there for it. On the 15th December 1880, at the age of 28, Alice finally grew up and married Reginald Jervis Hargreaves, who was a former at Christ Church College and an English teacher. She actually then became a noted society hostess, and the couple had 3 sons, Carroll Liddell, Alan Kniverton and Leopold Reginald, so good names there. Alan and Leopold were sadly killed in World War I, but Carroll survived to have a family of his own. And during the war, Alice joined the Red Cross as a volunteer, and she did a lot of work and was subsequently awarded a medal for this, which is now currently on display in the Museum of Oxford. She died aged 82 in 1934, and her ashes were buried in the graveyard of the Church of St Michael and All Angels in Lyndhurst, Hampshire, where she did spend most of her life. And looking back at her relationship with Lewis Carroll, it was actually the fact that Lewis Carroll actually, looking at it, fancied her elder sister. So we think this is why he was such close friends with Alice, trying to ingratiate himself with the elder daughter. Thomas Dover, he was born in Barton-on-the-Heath near Stratford in 1616, and was the grandson of Robert Dover, who founded the Chipping Campden Cotswold Olympic Games, which I'm sure you've all heard about. After attending Chipping Campden Grammar School, Dover went to Oxford and then went to Cambridge to study medicine. In 1696, he moved to Bristol, where he set up his own lucrative practice, but he also worked with the Bristol Corporation of the Poor as an honorary physician at St Peter's Hospital. Bristol was a very large city with very few physicians, actually, but it did have many wealthy merchants and many sailors. Many of these were suffering from what they called fast living at the time, which is just beer and prostitutes, basically. And through his sort of new treatments Dover began devising, he quickly became known as Dr. Quicksilver, which is a medicine used to treat various sort of sexually transmitted diseases. And as well as being the inventor of this, he actually created a cold and fever medicine called Dover's powder. And believe it or not, this is still available today. You can still buy this today. It's used as a sort of a tonic and a sort of Alka-Seltzer sort of thing. I don't know how effective it is. I've never tried it, but if you get desperate, you never know. The financial success that Dover obtained being the surgeon in Bristol and physician enabled him to buy a rather large house in what was then the very, very fashionable Bristol's Queen Square, and it's still there today, bottom right picture there. It's a lovely place to walk through, and it's still very popular. It's still quite pricey to live there. By chance, this also happened to be the home to Woodes Rogers, who was an English sea captain, privateer, slave trader, and from 1718 the first royal governor of the Bahamas. So he was also a pirate on the side as well. But Dover and Rogers became really close friends, and Dover subsequently introduced Dover to many new acquaintances among Bristol's maritime community. And of course, Bristol had a thriving maritime community. It was one of the busiest, if not the busiest seaport in England at this time. And Dover was also then persuaded to embark on a sea voyage to the West Indies, and he did this. It obviously clearly suited him, for he really enjoyed it. And on his return, he actively began to look to invest and embark on more maritime adventures. His chance arrived in 1708 when a gentleman called William Damper, the explorer, pirate, privateer, navigator and naturalist, arrived in Bristol and began to advertise for a new privateer voyage to capture a Spanish treasure ship. And they would do this. They would actually hear about a Spanish treasure ship and decide that's going to capture it and actually advertise it in the papers. I want a crew, I want ships, I want money to invest. So it was a fairly commonplace thing. And Dover bought into the plan, and he became part owner and second captain of the 36-gun Duke, which was a privateer under the command of Woodes Rogers. So this is where he gets into this sort of sea-going scene properly. He contributed about £3,000 to the voyage. It's about £350,000 today. It was actually the second largest stakeholder of 30 investors. So you can see this, the people were piling money into this to realising what the returns might be, and we'll look at them a little bit later. So on 1st of August 1708, the Duke set sail from Bristol alongside Damper's own ship, the Duchess, and they headed for the western seaboard of Mexico via Cape Horn. Quite a long, arduous voyage, but everything seemed to work right. And all was going well, and when on the 2nd of February 1709, off the west coast of Chile, a light was seen on the uninhabited Juan Fernandez Islands, and everybody knew nobody lived there, and they were curious as to what this light was. So Dover led a party to investigate, excuse me, and when they landed, they discovered Alexander Selkirk, a Scottish sailor who'd been abandoned on the island in 1705 by Damper, even though he couldn't remember it. So Dover rescued the Scot, and his 4-year stay on the island and eventual rescue would become the subsequent inspiration for the novel Robinson Crusoe, written by Daniel Defoe, who was also a friend of Woodes Rogers and also knew Dover. So this is a little tenuous connection. It's probably not intended as a children's book, but it certainly became one of the most loved TV shows, The Adventures of Robinson Crusoe. And hands up if you're singing the theme tune. I know I always do. I love it. So ultimately, the expedition was successful, and they eventually amassed about £147,000 worth of plundered goods, worth about 16 million today, and most of it did come from the capture of the Spanish galleon, the Nuestra Señora de Encarnación de Desangano. I love that. It's great pronunciation. Probably not right, but I like it. They caught that in December 1709. It took 3 years for the expedition. When they arrived home, the prizes were shared out between the investors, and Dover received nearly £7,000, about 1.3 million today, and that was more than enough to secure himself a high position in society. So being from sort of, a surgeon, physician, which were okay, well accepted, now he's one of the best people around. And as a result of this, he realised he never needed to go to sea again, so he returned to medicine and began a new practice in London, treating the great and the good. And in 1736, he moved into a house with his close friend Robert Tracy, which is where the Gloucestershire connection is re-established. Excuse me, sorry about that. He died aged 82 in 1742 and was buried in the local church there at Stanway. So he was a great man, and you can still go and see it today. Well, I say you can. The grave apparently has disappeared. It's not there in the church anymore. Moving on, we got this my lovely little title here is Lydney Barad-dûr, the One Ring in Gloucestershire. So located on the Forest of Dean, with views of the Severn, the Roman and British temple at Lydney is quite famous. It was excavated by Sir Mortimer Wheeler, the famous archaeologist, in 1928-29. Among the artefacts that they found was a lead curse tablet to the god Nodens, on which was written a plea about a ring belonging to Sylvanus, which appeared to have been stolen by a chap called Synesius, upon whom Sylvanus invoked a curse. And Roman loved making curses. They'd curse tablets. There's loads at Ely that were found. But this one's nice. There's a picture on the left-hand side of what it looks like. It always starts off the standard DEO to the god Nodens. And this goes on to read, Sylvanus has lost the ring. He thereby gives half of it, i.e. half its value, to Nodens. Among those who are called Synesius, do not allow health until he brings it to the temple of Nodens. So here you go. You've got this ring that's disappeared, and there's a curse on it. And you think, okay, what's that got to do with anything? But amazingly, Sylvanus' ring had been discovered in a plough field near Silchester in 1785, and there's a picture of it. After its discovery, this precious ring became the property of the Shute family, because basically the farmer who found it sold it to them, and it's now kept in the Vine, their house in Hampshire, which is a National Trust property. So you can go and see this, okay, and it's so important. I love it. Wheeler made the connection between this ring and a curse tablet bearing the same name. He then asked J.R.R. Tolkien, Professor of Anglo-Saxon, Oxford University, to investigate the etymology of the name Nodens referred to in the curse. And Tolkien was told all about the cursed tablet and subsequently visited the Lydney Park excavations and probably spent a little bit of time wandering around Gloucestershire, we think. And today it's widely thought that the curse of the ring became the inspiration for the One Ring in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And I'm sure we know the basic rhyme there, which I've pictured. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in this darkness bind them in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. You know, and this, I think, is a great little connection, a great little story. You can argue that The Lord of the Rings really isn't children's reading, but The Hobbit definitely is. I read The Hobbit the first time when I was about 7 at school, and I absolutely loved it, and I've loved it ever since. But that isn't our only connection with J.R. Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. Another great link is Farmer Maggot's Memorial down at Dundry Nurses and Bamfurlon Lane near Staventon. And you get, this comes in from Lord of the Rings. I'll read it for you at the bottom here. I know these fields and this gate, said Frodo. This is Bamfurlon, old Farmer Maggot's land. That's his farm away there in the trees. One trouble after another, said Frodo, looking at nearly as much alarmed as if Pippin had declared the lane was the slot leading to a dragon's den. The others all looked at him in surprise. What's wrong with old Maggot? Asked Pippin. He's a good friend to all the Brandybucks. Of course he's a terror to trespassers and keeps ferocious dogs. But after all, folk down here are near the border and have to be more careful. Brilliant. I love it. And basically, this memorial is made of cut plate steel. It's the brainchild of Chris Evans, the chap who owns the nursery. You can't really see it in summer because it's completely overcrowded with plants. So this is a photo I took last year in the winter, and you can see there's a couple of dogs there. There's a little pyramid behind. It's got writing on it. It's really nice. We don't know if Tolkien ever visited this area, but he does use Bamfurlong in Lord of the Rings. I've just read you the section. And he actually uses other Gloucestershire places. Buckland is mentioned, and also Underhill. And of course, Underhill was the name that Frodo Baggins went when he stayed at the Prance and Proney in Bree. So, we know Gloucestershire did play on Tolkien's mind a bit. There's also a lot of references to the fact that potentially a lot of the places in Lord of the Rings were based on in the Forest of Dean, especially the, I can't remember the place near Colford at the moment, which is the also used in Star Wars and things. So it's there's a lot of connections with that, I think, in Gloucestershire. Moving on to Treasure Island, that's probably our strongest link, has to be said. Originally it was entitled The Sea Cook, A Story for Boys, and it's an adventure novel by the great Scottish author Robert Louis Stevenson, and it tells a story of buccaneers and buried gold. I'm sure you all know it. It's considered a coming-of-age story, noted for its atmosphere, characters and action, and here's a great author as well, it has to be said. Kidnapped is a fantastic book, very sort of similar in vein as well. And since its publication in 1883, 1983. Treasure Island has had significant influence on depiction of pirates in popular culture. So, and we wouldn't have Jack Sparrow without Treasure Island, that's for sure. You've got deserted tropical islands, treasure maps marked with an X, one-legged seamen and parrots perched on the soldiers. Literally a lot of what we know as pirates evolves from Treasure Island, essentially. And of course, Long John Silver, he's the main antagonist of Treasure Island. A cunning and opportunistic pirate who was the quartermaster under the notorious pirate Captain Flint. You don't read a lot about him in the book, but he's there in the background. We know Long John Silver lived in Bristol. He was married to a woman of African descent whom he trusted enough to manage his business affairs in his absence. And because he was at sea, this was always a long time. He was said to have lost his leg in the Royal Navy under the immortal Admiral Hawke at one of the battles in the 1780s. And we know, although he's very treacherous and willing to change sides all the time, he does have some compensating values. He was very physically courageous despite his disability. And he was wise enough to save his money, unlike the contrast to the spendthrift ways of normal pirates. Normal pirates, as soon as they got money, they'd actually spend it on wine, women, and song. They had no more. But we know that Silver sort of scurried it away for his retirement. So he's a great character, really, has to be said. So what's our link to Gloucestershire? Well, William Ernest Henley was a poet, writer, a critic and editor, born in Gloucester in 1849, the oldest of 6 children of William Mary Henley, born on Eastgate Street. In 1868, aged 19, and a year after leaving the Cripps School, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis of the bone that resulted in amputation of his left leg below the knee. He subsequently moved to London, became a journalist, and soon became a real famous fixture in literary circles, especially after his poem Invictus was published in 1875. And I'm sure we've all read the poem and know the story of Invictus. Henley was a great friend of Robert Louis Stevenson, and according to Stevenson's letters, Henley was the idea for the character of Long John Silver, and it was Henry actually inspired it. In a letter to Henley after the publication of Treasure Island, Stevenson wrote, "I will now make a confession. It was the sight of your maimed strength and masterfulness that begot Long John Silver. The idea of the maimed man, ruling and dreaded by the sound, was entirely taken from you." Of course, our most famous rendition of Long John Silver has to be Robert Newton in the 1950 RKO Disney adaptation of Treasure Island. Newton was a West Country lad from Bristol, and he exaggerated his West Country accent, and this has since become standard pirate speak. And Newton is also the patron saint of the annual International Talk Like a Pirate Day, which sadly we have just missed. It was last week, 19th September. I do hope you said a few "ooh, our Jim lads" and things like this to make it more fun. Quick look at Captain Flint. Obviously, with Captain Flint's a character, but it's also the name of Long John Silver's parrot. He generally is on Silver's shoulder and is famous for chattering pirate or seafaring phrases like "pisses right," or "stand by to go about." So it's quite a fun character. And according to Silver, the parrot was maybe 200 years old. They lives forever mostly, and if everybody's seen more wickedness, it must be the devil himself, which is a great line. And allegedly, the bird had gone virtually around the world: Madagascar, Malabar, Suriname, Providence, Portobello, and Goa. But he's to say is a great character of the actual story as well. Now, if you like Long John Silver, and quite frankly, in Treasure Island, you'd be mad not to, you can actually go on a Long John Silver Trust walk. So the Long John Silver Trust, an organisation in Bristol, they laid out a Treasure Island trail around Bristol's floating harbour with stops at the places that are mentioned in Treasure Island, because a lot of the places are mentioned because it was initially set, the story began in Bristol. And you can download one of these maps from the internet, from the Trust's website, and it will take you to various places. And where you come across one of these barrels with a palm tree in, that's one of the items in the actual story itself. So it used to be able to push a button, it'd say it, but I think now you've got a QR code on your phone, you'll get a reading from the book. It's very family friendly, it's easy to walk. There are several hostelries en route, several dozen hostelries I have to say, and we archive staff have tried it out. There's nothing we won't do for history in the archives, and it was a good day we did it too. We took a parrot along, which is called the Parrot of Shame, so if you did something wrong, you had the parrot on your shoulder, and we even took a dog. So there's Jacko the dog at the dog's bar at one of the pubs at Redcliffe there. So yeah, we had a great time, and it's a nice, thoroughly recommend it. It's a good walk to do, especially if you've got any interest in Treasure Island. Neverland in Gloucestershire. Okay, so James Matthew Barrie, the famous Scottish novelist and playwright, who's best remembered, of course, for Peter Pan, which is a wonderful story. He was born in Kirramore in May 1860. He's the ninth child of 10 children born to David Barrie, who is a handloom weaver, and his wife, Margaret Ogilvie. One very important moment that influenced James's later life was that when he was 6 years old, his elder brother David, who was the mother's favourite child, sadly died in an ice skating accident on the day before his 14th birthday. This left his mother devastated, and she didn't really ever recover from it, but she found a bit of comfort in the fact that her dead son would remain a boy forever, never to grow up and never to leave her. After attending university at Edinburgh, Barrie moved to London, where he lived behind Great Ormond Street Hospital, and started writing plays and novels, and became quite a successful little playwright and author, and there's a couple of the books there. In 1897, he met the Llewellyn Davies family and their 5 sons, who, coupled with the memories of his older brother, inspired him to write Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, a play about an ageless boy, a fairy called Tinkerbell, a girl named Wendy, all of whom have ventures in the fantasy realm of Neverland. And this picture here, the bottom left one, is one of the Llewellyn Davies' sons, the one who inspired Peter, and there's Nana the dog that they had there. After the Llewellyn Davies family parents died in 1907 and 1910 respectively, Barrie was appointed trustee and guardian of the boys. The family liked him, he was a close friend, and again there was no suggestion of anything untoward. Just Barrie really liked the family and liked the children, liked the family. The first ever stage production of Peter Pan took place at the Duke of York Theatre in London on 27th December 1904. There's a sort of picture of the thing. And the actress Nina Buckhart, can't pronounce that name, Buckhart, starred as Peter, and Gerald de Maurier played Captain Hook and Mr. Darling. In 1905, the play went to Broadway, where Maud Adams took the role on Peter for more than 10 years. So it's a long-running play. And all these pictures come courtesy of the Great Ormond Street Hospital website. Bless them. Back to London, Barrie became a strong supporter of Gosh, and in 1929 he was asked by the committee there to sit on a new committee to help buy land so the hospital could build a much needed new ring. Much to the hospital's chagrin, Barrie turned down the offer. He said he couldn't do it, but he'd hoped to find another way to help. 2 months later, the hospital board was stunned to learn that Barrie donated the rights to Peter Pan to Gosh in perpetuity. And this gave the hospital the royalties from every production of the play, every publication of the book, and it still does to this day. But Gosh has always honoured Barrie's wishes of never sharing the amount raised for the hospital from the royalties, so we just don't know. But it has to be a pretty substantial sum, I would think. Bless him, what a great chap. So the Gloucester connection with all this is that Barrie were often stayed at Stanway House above Cheltenham there. At this time, Stanway was the seat of the Earls of Wemyss and occupied by Mary Constance Charteris, Countess of Wemyss and March, wife of Hugo Charteris, the 11th Earl of Wemyss and the 7th Earl of March. What a mouthful that is, eh? The couple had married in 1883, but by 1912, Hugo was spending most of his time in Scotland and East Lothian with his long-term mistress, Lady Angela Forbes, and she'd actually taken up the position of mistress after the death of his previous mistress, the Duchess of Leinster. What lives these people led, eh? Mary, sort of the wife of Hugo, wasn't alone, however. She had an affair with Wilfred Scorn Blunt and maintained a cerebral blood for Arthur Balfour. Barrie and others of the literary set were frequent visitors to Stanway, but in what connection, we don't actually know. Whether he was a close friend, a friend with benefits, we haven't got a clue. We really don't know. Um, what I love about this, so Barry was a great cricket enthusiast, who isn't, and he wasn't a brilliant player like me. But one of his lasting legacies is that he paid for the pavilion at the Stanway Cricket Ground, which to this day is known as Pan's Pavilion, and there's a lovely photograph of it there. In 1887, he founded an amateur cricket team for his literary friends of similar limited playing ability and named it the Allah Akbaris, under the mistaken belief that the Arabic phrase Allah Akbar meant heaven help us, and actually means God is great. And some of the best known authors of the era played on the team at various times. So these people came to Gloucestershire: H.G. Wells, Rudyard Kipling, Arthur Conan Doyle, P.G. Wodehouse, Jerome K. Jerome, G.K. Chesterton, A.A. Milne, Owen Seaman, who was the editor of Punch, Bernard Partridge, George Cecil Ives, George Llewellyn Davis, who was one of the Lost Boys, remember, and Hallam Tennyson, the son of Alfred Lord Tennyson. You had all these famous people coming to the county because of J.M. Barrie. And there are hints of other literary connections here. Conan Doyle might have heard the story of the Black Dog of Birdlip. Could that be any inspiration for the Hound of the Baskervilles? I'd like to think some of H.G. Wells's ideas, the time machine, might have come from the county. There's no proof of this whatsoever. Certainly P.J. Wodehouse might have looked at some of the upper classes and thought they're a bunch of twits. I'll do Jeeves and Worcester on this. We'll never know, but it's good fun to think about. Not surprisingly, the Allah Akbaris played for the love of the game rather than the results to achieve, and Barry was always generous in his praise for his teammates in the opposition. He praised one of his teammates' performance by observing that you scored a good single in the first innings, but were not so successful in the second, which is great, a bit like England playing cricket at the moment. Perhaps wisely, whenever they came to play a new team, he forbade the Al Akbaris from practicing on the opponent's ground before the match because it could only give them confidence, basically, which is great. His most calamitous performance was when he was clean bowled by the American actress Mary Anderson in the 1897 Test match against the Village of Broadway. So it must have been great days when these literary people came in to play cricket against local teams. And it's one of the reasons local village cricket is still so much loved today. While I was writing this, I found another little connection which is very interesting, and it's a really odd link, but Barry was also a good friend of W.E. Henley, the one-legged poet who was the inspiration for Long John Silver we've just looked at. In 1878, Henley moved to Scotland and married a girl called Hannah Boyle, and the couple had one child, Margaret Emma. She was born in 1888, and she remained a very sickly child throughout what was to be a short life. And Barry often visited the family and became close friends with them, but unable to speak clearly, young Margaret called him a Friendy Wendy sort of thing. So she couldn't pronounce the name, but just called him Friendy Wendy. And Barry subsequently used the name Wendy in Peter Pan for his heroine. Which is a lovely connection, but sadly Margaret did not survive. She died in 1894, basically at the age of 6, bless her. But again, one of these really odd literary connections that you get. Moving on to Beatrix Potter, she was obviously a writer, illustrator, natural scientist and conservativist. We've all heard of her. Best known for children's books featuring animals such as The Tale of Peter Rabbit, which was first published in 1902. Her books, excuse me, including 23 tales, have sold more than 250 million copies. She's also a pioneer of merchandising because in 1903, Peter Rabbit became the first fictional character to be made into a patented stuffed toy, making him the oldest licensed character, believe it or not. So she's very, very savvy, this woman. Really good luck to her. And we come to the Tailor of Gloucester. So in 1897, Beatrix came to Gloucestershire to spend a few days visiting her cousin, Caroline Hutton, who lived at Harescombe Grange, just to the south of the city. While she was there, her cousin told her about the story of John Pritchard, who was a local Gloucester tailor whose premises were at 45 Westgate Street. And this is a picture of it, one of Phil Moss's fantastic drawings. Now, Pritchard had been hired to make a new coat for the city's mayor, and after working late one night, had left it unfinished, but when he returned to his shop the next day, the coat was completed apart from one buttonhole and a note that read, "No more twist." His assistants had actually finished the coat, but Pritchard, very, very cleverly and very cunningly, told everyone that fairies had done the work, and it soon became a local legend, and people would come to ask it or look to see if they could see any fairies in his shop. Potter loved this tale and went to Gloucester to see the shop, which is now the Sword Inn there. It's the building on the left-hand side. And while she was there, she sketched some of the other buildings, notably those by the cathedral. And she subsequently rewrote the story, moved the shop to 9 College Court, which was she preferred the look of, and which stands beside the ancient St Michael's Gate. And there's a couple of pictures of it today, picture from the book and a picture as it is today, which is the Beatrix Potter Museum, which we'll look at in a moment. So although Pritchard was actually a young man only in his 20s, Potter made her tailor a little old man in spectacles with a pinched face and old crooked fingers. She also moved the tale back into the 1700s and introduced Simpkin, the tailor's cat, who I absolutely adore. He's great, Simpkin. And most importantly, she substituted mice for fairies. And thanks to the museum down in Gloucester, for the Beatrix Potter Museum, for letting us use these images, by the way. Presumably Beatrix already formed the story in her mind, but it wasn't until 1901 that she committed the tale to paper, and she did it as a Christmas present for the daughter of one of her tutors, Frida Moore. And you got this little letter: "Dear, my dear Frida, because you are fond of fairy tales and have been ill, I've made you a story all for yourself, a new one that nobody's read before. And the curious thing about it is that I heard it in Gloucestershire and that it is true. Well, at least about the tailor, the waistcoat, and the no more twist." Beatrix, we know, later rewrote the story and it became a third book and was published by Frederick Warne in 1902. And for all the years, for all the books she did, she always said that the Tailor of Gloucester was a personal favourite, which I think is a really nice thing to know about. And again, if you like Beatrix Potter, and let's face it, who doesn't? Even the films, the recent films are quite fun, the live action ones. You can go and indulge your childhood memories of the tale by visiting Beatrix Potter's tailor shop in College Court. As well as the shop full of Potter merchandise, there's a museum, it's free entry. This is the plug I promised them in return for using the pictures. So please don't go and visit it. It's a great little shop. It really is fun to go in. And the museum is really, really interesting as well. Moving on to Christmas Carol, we all know it, novella by Charles Dickens, first published in London by Chapman Hall in 1843. It recounts the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, the elderly miser who is visited by the ghost of his former business partner Jacob Marley, and then the spirits of Christmas past, Christmas present, and the Christmas yet to come, after which Scrooge is transferred from a miser into a kinder, gentler, more generous man. Dickens wrote the story at a time when the Victorians were re-evaluating past Christmas traditions, and they included carols in this plus newer customs such as cards and Christmas, an idea that Christmas should be a time of charity and goodwill to all men. We know that Dickens was strongly influenced by the experience of his own youth, notably his family's time in the debtor's prison. And he was inspired about all this upon a visit to the Field Lane Ragged School, which is one of the several establishments for London street children, which he strongly supported. And obviously it was clearly no fun being a street urchin in London at this time. It was a terrible time. And there was a real groundswell of Victorian opinion that such children should be looked after. The treatment of the poor and the ability of a selfish man to redeem himself by transforming into a more sympathetic character are the key themes of this story, which I'm sure we all know and love. So, like a couple of other stories earlier on, what's this got to do with Gloucestershire, I hear you ask? Well, it's very likely that Ebenezer Scrooge there, with the picture of Alistair Sim, bless him, was based on the famous Gloucester miser Jemmy Wood. Dickens had no doubt heard of Wood, and had written several similar characters and situations in many of his books. There's a character by the name of Dismal Jemmy, appears in the Pickwick Papers. The legendary court case of Jarndyce versus Jarndyce in Bleak House is probably inspired by the legal battle caused by Jemmy Wood's own will. And Jemmy Wood is actually mentioned by name in Our Mutual Friend, and that's a painting of Wood there. James Jemmy Wood, a little bit about him, born 1756, died in 1836, was the owner of the Gloucester Old Bank and was nationally known as the Gloucester Miser. And this is a lovely print here by George Rowe, Cheltenham, depicting him with a bank in the background there. He inherited the bank from his grandfather, who had founded it in 1716. It was said to be one of the oldest private banks in Britain, and it was doing quite well. It survived the financial issues of the Napoleonic Wars when many banks went out of business. But we know that sort of Wood actually was quite a tight-fisted chap. He would only pay interest on an account after it had been open for 2 years, and he was, very tight with the money. He also owned an undertaking business and a drapery in the bank, whose staff consisted of just Wood and 2 clerks operating from one end of the shop, so he didn't have a separate property for it. And again, this is all to do with money saving and everything. In 1838, after his death, the bank was taken over by the County of Gloucestershire Banking Company, which in 1897 became part of Lloyd's Bank, and it still is. Jemmy Wood's wealth of his death, around about £900,000 at the time, worth about 54 million today, was stated at the time to have made him the richest commoner in His Majesty's dominions. Got some lovely pictures. This is a picture drawn by C. Smart from life. It shows Jemmy in front of his desk with a pile of coin. And I particularly like the expression of the chap on the outside. Have a look at that. Isn't it great? Looking at there, looking very scared, trying not to catch the eye of Wood himself. We don't really know what he was like as a person, with just all these anecdotes about how miserly he was. And there are many stories of these. Most common ones that he walked everywhere rather than paying for a carriage. He'd often walk to Gloucester docks to pick up bits of coal dropped during the unloading and loading of boats there. So, he's one of these chaps. I'm sure we all know people like him. The 1700s, though, were a great time for savage caricatures, and this is another one drawn by George Rowe of Cheltenham. There you go. Have a quick look at it. It's called The Manager Admitting a New Partner, Jemmy's Initiation. And it shows Jemmy there counting wood with a devil overlooking over his shoulder. Other demons in the background there at the top with books are acting as clerks. And there's one little demon stoking the fires of hell beneath the money. Really savage stuff this is. We just don't get it anymore. Not since Spitting Image disappeared, I don't think. I do think all this Scrooge would be really very, very proud of Jemmy Wood. So as Wood mentioned, he died in 1836, buried in St Mary de Crypt Church in Gloucester, where there is a gravestone to his memory in his chancel, which you can go and see. That's a picture of it. The coffin was said to have been stoned on the way to his burial. So again, you can get an idea. People really didn't like him. He never married, so had no children, and his will stated that his fortune was to be shared equally between his executors, who are Sir Matthew Wood, John Chadbourne, a solicitor, Jacob Osborne, and John Sermon. However, subsequently, a damaged codicil was later discovered, leaving money to the City of Gloucester and other beneficiaries. And this triggered a court case, like Jarndyce and Jarndyce, basically absorbed most of the estate and eventually led to poor Chadbourne committing suicide. So it really was not a pleasant thing to be done. Sort of coming to the end of the talk now, and I do have to mention J.K. Rowling. She's the author of Harry Potter novels, and she lived in the village of Tuthill as a child. She attended YD Comprehensive School near Chepstow, and there are numerous local people and places that inspired her writing and feature in them. Most famous ones are probably the Tuthill Tornadoes, who are a Quidditch team, and Professor Snape was based on one of her teachers. In the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Hermione recalls a holiday with her parents in the Forest of Dean, and the characters then venture into the forest, and locations in Dean were used for the subsequent film. And I've now remembered one of the locations that I mentioned earlier, Puzzlewood. That was one of the locations that Tolkien probably used as well to inspire from Mordor. And it's because Puzzlewood's a really great bit of near Colford. If you go to it, it's very spooky, very good. Also, excuse me again, there is actually a Mugglewort near Blaisdon, and this might have been part inspiration for a name for non-magic folk in novels, the Muggles. You never know. So that brings us to the end of the talk for this month. To say it's been a short one, partly because I sort of had to stretch the thing. We'll try and take some questions. Just to remind you always, our next event at the Heritage Hub here is a partnership event with Gloucestershire Libraries called Behind the Themes, and it's a spotlight on the real life stories of children's literature in Gloucestershire. There's going to be a great talk by Angela Dunsbury entitled The Darker Side of Nursery Rhymes, and if you remember her talk on execution a few months ago, that's going to be a cracker. And also, again, our City Company, there's going to be a special treat. It'll be a story time by Liz Veller, lead librarian at Cheltenham of Gloucestershire Libraries. Get that right. Lead children's librarian of Gloucestershire Libraries. And we do have an author coming in, and I thought I'd updated this slide. I obviously haven't. I've forgotten her name, but she's a children's author who's going to be coming in and doing sort of a story and sort of reading us, introducing her to her books. And it's just real woeful of me. I've forgotten the name completely. But as usual, we've got a display of related documents. We've also got free refreshments on hand as always, and the Gloucestershire Family History Society will be on hand to find the kids in your family. And a little final plug here for our next secret reveal talk. It's called Got a Family Secret, Can You Keep It? And to look at some of the resources in the archives you can use to family history, which is going to be a precursor to our November event, Saturday event, which is a family history fair led by the Gloucestershire Family History Society. So on that note, I'll hand back to you, Gemma, and we'll happily take any questions if we have any. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks ever such a lot, John. That was fascinating. I think the lady's name who's coming in is Hayley Hoskins.
That's it. Yep.
And yeah, she's a children's book writer, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, please do look her up, Hayley Hoskins. And I'm sure it's going to be a really good one. We don't have any questions, I don't think.
Excellent.
We've got one comment, which was from Tony Yates. He thinks that Dover's powder may not actually be available because apparently it contains opium.
Yes.
So I don't know. I did do a very quick search while I was sat here. I didn't find anything, but maybe that's something that people can have a look at after the talk.
Yeah, I think I looked at a couple when I found was researching it. I put, as you do, trying to get pictures of the bottles, and I found quite a few modern looking labels with Dover's powder. So whether it's like they did. Older folks here might remember a medicine called G's Linctus, which was a cough medicine. My dad loved it. He used to drink it by the bottleful. When I got to a certain age, I realised it contained morphine, basically. And I think my dad loved it because of that. But whether it's one of these medicines that they took it out of, because you can still buy G's Linctus today, it doesn't taste half as good as it used to. And I think it's because it's got no morphine and no sugar in it. But I suspect Dover's powder is available in the sort of refined version without the addictive drugs.
Yeah, they do that sometimes, don't they? Okay, that's brilliant. I just had a quick look. I don't think that there's anybody else who's got their hand up. I'll just have one quick look in case I've missed anybody. No, I think that's it. So I'd like to thank you again, John, for giving us another fascinating talk, and to thank all of you for coming along. So we hope to see you next time, and please do drop in to our next Saturday event. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Cheers, folks. Bye-bye.